Good evening, everyone. I know, right? I was walking out of a Tim Hortons and my phone started to blow up. I had just finished a meeting and it was a very interesting meeting and nothing to do with Gerald Butts. But my phone started to blow up with people texting me saying, Butts is resigned. I was like, what? I was about an hour away from my house, but I couldn't wait to do my video today. Honestly. Okay, that's one too many popcorn gifts. Right. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. So Justin Trudeau puts out in a tweet this statement, and we are going to go through Gerald Butts' wacky resignation letter. The resignation letter just had me, every single paragraph I was just reading with like, it gets better. It just keeps getting better. So here's Justin Trudeau. He says, quote, Gerald Butts served this government and our country with integrity, sage advice, and devotion. Can you serve a country with sage advice? Okay, back to the tweet. Sorry. I want to thank him for his service and continued friendship. Please read his statement today. And here's the statement. The link is in the description. You can read it for yourself. And the statement says, quote, this is Gerald Butts' resignation letter. I'm going to say that a couple of times because it's crazy. Quote, I have resigned as Principal Secretary to the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, PM, MP, Prime Minister of Canada. He has accepted my resignation. Recently, anonymous sources have alleged that I pressured the former Attorney General, the Honourable Jody Wilson-Raybould, to assist SNC Lavalin with being considered for a deferred prosecution agreement. I categorically deny the accusation that I or anyone else in his office pressured Mr. Wilson-Raybould. We honoured the unique role of the Attorney General. At all times, I and those around me acted with integrity and a singular focus on the best interests of all Canadians. The Prime Minister of Canada's office is much larger and more important than any of its staff. I have served it to the best of my abilities, and I have at all times given the Prime Minister free and unfettered advice. I have served the public interest, not the interest of any individual or any narrow private interest of any kind at any time. Life is full of uncertainties, but I am absolutely certain of that. Okay. Carrying on. Any accusations that I or staff put pressure on the Attorney General is simply not true. Canadians are rightly proud of their public institutions. They should be, because they work. But the fact is that this accusation exists. It cannot and should not take one moment away from the vital work the Prime Minister and his office is doing for all Canadians. My reputation is my responsibility, and that is for me to defend. It is in the best interest of the office, and it's important work for me to step away. It's important work for me to step away. I apologize. I want to say a word about my relationship with Miss Wilson-Raybould. I encouraged her to run for the Liberal Party of Canada and worked hard to support her as a candidate and then cabinet minister. From my perspective, our relationship has always been defined by mutual respect, candor, and an honest desire to work together. On a personal note, I wish to thank the Prime Minister for the opportunity to work with him, his cabinet, and the Liberal caucus. They are great people who are dedicated to improving their country. I also want to thank my colleagues, Ken Telford. The last 7 years simply do not happen without her. Nobody knows that more than I do, and my colleagues in the PMO. It has been the highest honor of my professional life to have worked together with all of you on behalf of all Canadians. I wish them all well, and they have my full support. I also need to say this, and I know it's a non sequitur. Our kids and grandkids will judge us on one issue above all others. That issue is climate change. I hope the response to it becomes the collective, non-partisan, urgent effort that science clearly says is required. I hope that happens soon. Every hard problem requires a thoughtful, collaborative solution from the country it affects. Those solutions, in turn, depend on good, hard-working people who devote their time and energy to public service. Canada has those people in abundance. While it is fashionable sometimes in some quarters to denigrate politicians and public servants, my experience is that the women and men who serve Canadians in elected office and the professional public service are honest, decent, hard-working people who put service of country beyond self every day. Life is many days, and there are hard days in public life, but there are no bad ones. I hope I did the job in a way that would have made my parents proud and will make my children consider public service. Right? There's just so many question marks. The statement, non-statement to Miss Wilson-Raybould. I want to say that we had mutual respect in our relationship. Weird. On a personal note, thanking the Prime Minister to work in his caucus, well, it's largely kind of believed that you were the driving force, the mastermind behind the Prime Minister. So Weird, Mr. Butts. Weird. And maybe this is just a statement. Maybe this isn't his actual resignation letter, but all the links that I've been seeing are this is the resignation letter. So if I got that wrong, I apologize. So here's 222 minutes, which I find much funnier than this hour has 22 minutes. And he says, or they say, Gerald Butts has resigned as principal secretary in the Prime Minister's office. This has left a hole, a Butts hole. I thought that was funny. And John Brassard says, I trust at GM Butts knows people can still be charged with obstruction of justice even though they resign, which that's the question. That was immediately what I jumped to my head. I was like, well, he knows that, like, it doesn't work. He can't Scott Bryson this, right? Like, it doesn't work the same way. I'm still not 100% sure on why Scott Bryson isn't going to be pulled in front of the Norman case. I don't get why resigning his position changes anything legally for him. I haven't looked into it either, but still, if this becomes a legal matter, and it looks like it might, that this is no defense. This is just trying to save the PM, maybe. National Newswatch says, on CTV, Peter MacKay says, in his memory of political history, you have to go back to the Tsars in Russia and Rasputin to find a single non-elected person that wielded so much power as Gerald Butts. And I would agree, man. Wow. He destroyed Ontario through Kathleen Wynne and her awful policies. And, well, I mean, just look at the 3 short years that Justin Trudeau has wreaked havoc in Canada. And behind the scenes has been, well, principal secretary who's resigned this afternoon. Whew, wild. And here, first, I wanted to show you Manny Ottawa. Manny Ottawa says, and I'm blocked, so I have to use the incognito tab. Manny Ottawa says, quote, my advice to GM Butts and Justin Trudeau, do not think for a moment you can outmaneuver at Puglass is Jody Wilson-Raybould. That's her Twitter handle. She is a principled lawyer who hired an excellent lawyer, ex-Supreme Court judge. You guys may know sleazy moves, but they know principled moves. The real game is on now. And man, I've heard speculation about what the real game could be. And I was saying, maybe Jody Wilson-Raybould crosses to the NDP. But I forgot that really the leader of the NDP is in a by-election right now, a by-election that is done on the 25th. And if he doesn't win, he's probably out. So if she runs the clock, I mean, look at what happened with not saying anything over the last week. It went from Justin Trudeau saying, privilege, nothing happening here, privilege, to Justin Trudeau saying, the conversations we had were totally above board. And when we talked about SNC Lavalin, they were vigorous debates. And oh, I should stop talking now? Yeah. So the more he talks, the more he digs his own, political future. And it's quite interesting. This is Tom Mulcair, and we're going to listen to a couple of choice spots. We're going to listen to the first 45 seconds or so. First 45 seconds or so here. And then we will pick it up. This is where Tom Mulcair is saying that GM Butts is Trudeau's right hemisphere, like half of his brain. Okay, link is in the description if you want to watch the whole thing. Here we go.
Mulcair, nowadays CTV News political analyst. Tom, in Montreal, what do you think about this?
Hi, Todd. Well, I think that the word you just used, bombshell, is not an exaggeration in this particular case. Gerald Butts wasn't just Justin Trudeau's right-hand man, he was his right hemisphere. He decided everything around him. You know, there's this standard form where a political party leader or a prime minister looks at the caucus and says, when my chief of staff or my principal advisor talks to you, I'm talking to you. Mr. Trudeau never had to say that about Gerald Butts because everybody knew that Gerald Butts was that person. So for him to resign saying he did nothing wrong, I think indicates clearly that they know an accusation is coming. She has probably received a legal opinion from former Supreme Court Justice Cromwell, who's her lawyer right now, saying, you can talk about that part of it. You can't talk about cabinet confidences or secrets, but you can certainly talk about that. That would have been my view, because I think that any secrecy there had been lifted by the people around Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Trudeau himself the minute they started talking about it. So that's the situation they were in. Mr. Trudeau must be on bended knee, hoping that she only names Gerald Butts, because he gets to look at it and say, he's gone. But that simply brings it back to Mr. Trudeau, because Mr.
Right. So the hilarious thing here is it looks like, okay, we got to put this fire out. Who are we gonna sacrifice? Who are we gonna sacrifice? Quick, it's got to be somebody big. It's got to be somebody important. All right, Gerald, you're done. Get out of here. But the only guilty party left is Trudeau himself, right? Like, went right to the top, right? So it's quite a difficult situation to be in. Okay, I'm going to cue up the next clip. Okay, here's Tom Mulcair talking about bad political timing. I was speculating on my drive home, and I thought, and I not tweeted this out, I talked to a couple of my friends in my little chat group, and I said, this is even worse than it seems on the surface, I think, because the timing is awful. If they knew they were going to sacrifice somebody on Friday of a long weekend, that's when Butts quits, right? He knows politically that that's the best time. By Monday, the news cycle has talked it out. People have already said, yay or nay, and you wait for Jody Wilson-Raybould to make her next move, because this is, well, not her next move, but she responds to this, right? Gerald resigns, and either that's good enough for her and she comes back into the fold and mea culpas and everybody closes ranks and this goes away, kind of, or she continues to remain silent, continues to stay kind of at odds with liberals, and the next shoe drops, right? But her response, well, it might depend on if Jagmeet Singh wins Burnaby, right? Because if you burn it out a few more days, not that long, an eternity in politics, but not that long to wait for leadership of a federal party and to face Justin Trudeau directly for leadership of the country, right? Fresh name, lots of name recognition, interesting spin. Anyway, here's Mr. Mulcair talking about the bad timing. If they knew on Friday that he was going to be sacrificed, he would have quit. He didn't. He waited till the Monday before session. House sits again tomorrow. Right? This is the biggest bombshell since SNC-Lavalin broke and heated up. This is awful timing politically. Awful. So either, well, no, they didn't know on Friday. And I think probably Mr. Mulcair is right. They know something bigger's coming. So here we go.
Look at the timing of this, how bad this is in terms of political communication. We're a Monday. The House is not sitting. It's quiet. This bombshell arrives, and guess what? It's going to be the only subject for the next week. So how is it that the Liberals are so disorganized when we've become quite used to a fairly well-run show? I think that coming in the wake of the Huawei disaster, with Canada playing that secondary role to the United States and keeping that senior executive from Huawei in house arrest in Vancouver, I think that added on top of it is this current disaster. There have been other iterations in the past few weeks where we've just been watching a show where the Liberals have been showing that they're not that good at these things. It's not a very well-run government. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems they have, because we are in an election year, and this sense that they're not in control of the agenda and they're having trouble piloting the country, I think that that's going to start to stick with Canadian voters in this election year, Todd.
Yep, and I think you're starting to see it happening in the polls. We've been looking at polls where the Liberals are sinking, and, the Conservative Party is rising. Last poll I saw was Liberals at 32, Conservative CPC had 37. So there's certainly a shift, and the PPC party is gaining too. So looks like the Liberals are shedding voters, and it looks like people are realizing that these clowns have no idea what they're doing. They inherited a G7 country and ran it into the ground in 3 years and messed up every single international relationship we have. It's incredible. There's one more little clip I want to show you. Hold on. So this is Mulcair talking about last week they said the story is not true, and this week it looks like there might be something to that story. Looks like it might get confirmed, as your principal secretary just quit, and they don't generally do that if there's nothing to quit over. So here's Mr. Mulcair.
And they weren't leaving any sort of wiggle room, Todd, when they said that Bob Fife's story in the Globe and Mail was not true. Guess what? Turns out that story is probably going to be confirmed, and that's why we're seeing such scurrying of so many people trying to leave the ship right now before the thing goes down. Look, they're in trouble. I mean, at the beginning of this one, everybody who knew anything about politics on the inside was saying, oof, this is a real mess. Now everybody in Canada realizes just how big a mess this is. It pits a lot of things in Quebec Inc. against a perception in the rest of Canada. A lot of Quebec commentators are saying, oh, if they'd have been in Ontario,
whatever, that doesn't really matter. But the main point of this is they're in trouble. It doesn't really matter is it might have been fixed in Ontario. Regardless, it's not fixed. It's carrying on. It's still in Canada. This is crony capitalism and ridiculous behavior on the part of the government, on the part of the principal secretary, on the part of all parties, really. And man, yeah, It's going to be interesting. These liberals are in trouble. This scandal is sticking. It's not going away. And it just keeps getting more and more interesting, doesn't it? Oh, I liked Galaxy Quest. It was very good. Okay, well, thank you for watching, everybody. Check out the People's Party of Canada.ca. Maxime Bernier promises clearly to stop crony capitalism. So, it's the best on offer that I can tell at this point. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.